This is Tell Me Exactly. I'm your host, Meredith Jensen. And today I'm telling you exactly how the protocols evolve because of users just like you. I have a very special guest joining us today, back again to talk about this. And sometimes I think he doesn't even need an introduction, but here he is, Dr. Jeff J. Clawson. Welcome, Doc.
Well, it's great to be here again.
Thanks. I'm so glad you decided to come back and chat with us. As we talked about, our most listened to episode was your introduction to Okay, tell me exactly what happened. So now we're going to kind of hit it from the back end and talk a little bit about the end of the protocols, the call us back immediately for further instructions. So let's get right to it. How did this come about? What's the history behind it?
Well, it's actually a little bit of an interesting story behind it, but let me start sort of at the beginning.
Okay. I love starting
In
at the beginning.
yeah, back in started to put the stuff together in 77, 78, and then we went live in Salt Lake in September 18th of 1979. The original protocol had what we called then just pre-arrival instructions. I'm trying to
Okay.
think. I could probably grab my old manual off the deal there, but and it had a list of A, B, C, D, very similar to how it is now in the PDIs.
Yeah.
In at the end of the 70s or 80s, I should say, we were just formed the academy and starting the standard process, standards council, which was present in a growing form that resulted in version 10. So the
Okay.
previous 9 versions were really myself and other folks that were interested. Had a couple of docs that I would consult with, things like that, uh, to advance the protocol as we heard things, but there was no formal organization or anything to do so. And that became something that was glaringly absent as it became a bigger sort of a thing, and it required more updating and required more formal even formatting and things. So in the run up to 10, we were doing an implementation in Los Angeles,
Hmm.
and there had been a thing we called the I think we called the G protocol. It was a special part of exit then that was the precursor to the exit cards, but had some special instructions about this, that, and the other.
Okay.
I remember we had a formal dispatch review committee
Hmm.
there and a steering committee. That was the beginnings of those two items uh, in, in probably late in '88. Hadn't come to be until '89, and then started holding them with the implementation in LA uh, that started on November 14th of '88. Um, Getting interesting cases, reviewing them, having the people in the QIU suggesting cases that needed to be reviewed. And I remember being up on the ninth floor of it's a building that's right by the Dragnet building. If you remember the old
Hmm.
beginnings of Sergeant Friday and Dragnet in Los
Yep.
Angeles,
Okay.
where the fire department was located. And we had a big table surrounded. Well, we must have had 10, 12 people there. And I had my one of my earliest dispatch friends and consultants, a guy named Scott Howard. You can see his picture in the front of the book. He's passed away since, but he was just a great guy. And as we say, he got it. And they brought up a case that they were listening to. And up until that point, later in the protocols, because at first we didn't have any callback of anything. It didn't say that. You just
Okay.
sort of terminated the call on your own. We hadn't gotten to
Just bye, good luck, and that's
right
it.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And and as we listened to more calls, you could tell there was standard ways to do it. There were standard better ways to do it, and we had the instruction there that said uh, basically, and if anything changes, call me back. And that was
Okay.
the terminating phrase. We're listening to a case, and I remember this case clearly because the dispatcher that was recorded was a firefighter who'd been injured. I know he was Cal State, certified EMT, but he had been injured in an off-duty motorcycle accident and had an amputated leg.
Oh, wow.
So he moved into communications, and he had a very, very interesting, almost engaging way of interacting when he was on the calls.
Okay.
He was somebody, his name was Ken Killian, and
How you remember these names just amazes me.
can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can
I
remember
can't
stuff
either.
from back then. Your
Okay, so
long-term memory is the
yeah.
last to go. You um,
So this guy had a really cool style
a
of how
style,
yeah,
exactly. It was just it was fascinating. I used to think if you could clone this guy,
yeah,
he would be like, okay, you know, I've got to ask some questions. If he said questions, which we don't say much now, we don't like
right.
that. It's
Gather
waste
information.
time.
Yeah,
I need to verify that for the paramedics.
yeah,
He always had a reason, and he always said it kind of in that way. So the people were oh, okay, because you're talking to somebody. When I was a kid, we call it talking to Captain Midnight. It was a
Captain Midnight. All right.
it was a TV and radio thing that if you any of you remember the famous Christmas Story movie where little Ralphie
Yes.
finally figures out he's got the ring, the decoder ring. And he
Mm-hmm.
figures out using, getting a special thing every week, listens faithfully that the thing said, drink
Drink
Ovaltine.
your Ovaltine.
He was
He
there.
was so
But
disappointed.
that was
Yeah.
Captain Midnight.
Okay.
So we just used that phrase. God, somebody's got it together. Sounds like Captain Midnight. So we're playing a case, and as he gets to the end of the case, he says, okay, I want you to call me back for further instructions. And he said it
Love
just
it.
like that. And the car said, okay. Because
Okay.
they would become almost as enthused as he was, and they're having the bad day, you know.
Yeah.
And
When
I
you say
looked
it
over
like
at
that, it sounds like you have a cape on, right?
right,
Like it sounds like a superhero.
and it wasn't in the protocol. And I think some of the people at the table looked over at me like, well, I guess he didn't follow protocol. And I just looked over at Scott Howard and kind of winked at him and said, well, that's going to be in the protocol from now on.
Next versions, yeah.
And that's how it came to be. And obviously, reviewing cases is where you hear a lot of real life stuff, not what ifs.
Hmm.
And that was probably one of the best things I'd ever heard because it gave you not just call me back. We already told him why, sort of, if anything changes, but for further instructions. And if that isn't a way to make people feel like they've reached somebody who knows what they're doing, who's able to help them, and who's asking, to be called back if necessary, I don't know what does.
Right.
It, and so we owe Ken Killian uh, in one of the zillions of calls he probably took it in L.A. Uh, for that advancement in the protocol.
Okay.
And there's other things that have come to be, that are similar, not necessarily instructions, but we call them reassurance phrases. And I clearly remember one in visiting for the first time the Manchester, England Comm Center.
Okay.
Was talking to the manager there, whose name was Beverly Logan, uh,
Hmm.
before she came to work for the academy and helping with what goes on in the UK.
Right.
And she says, you've got to hear this call. And I said, oh yeah, we heard a lot of calls. So she said, yeah, it's a dispatcher, hasn't actually been here very long. And um, she got a call from an older lady who was reporting that her husband had died.
Mhm.
Uh, It wasn't it wasn't that she'd found him dead, like an obvious death, but he there was a resuscitation potential.
Yeah.
And she was probably, either in her late 70s or early 80s.
Okay.
And during the pre-arrival instructions, you have to go back and actually look at, the patient. It
Right.
she got sad. She was crying not in a hysterical way, but in a true sadness way. I've lost my
Yeah.
companion. And the dispatcher there, the EMD, and in just a minute I'll remember her name too if I can. But said to the elderly lady, "It's okay, ma'am. We can do this together."
We can do this together.
And
Yeah.
if there was ever a compassionate type of an awareness reassurance statement, that had to be it.
Right.
Yeah, her name was Jenny. I'll remember it later. It comes in spurts at
You
my
know
age. So
what? I'm giving you
Jenny
full points for
Greenwood,
that one.
that was
There
it.
it
Jenny
is.
Jenny Greenwood. And then she took me upstairs to meet her, and that was just one of those other things you'll never forget. The moment you heard it, because it just reverberated. As
Yeah.
a as we add things, big and little to the protocol all the time
Hmm.
that we encounter through the the vast review and listening to cases that occur in agencies that do queue, which
Hmm.
wasn't even happening back in the early 80s. We didn't start doing that until about, no, 84, I think, 84, 85, to go
Okay.
back and look at the article we wrote, and using a little checklist. But you hear things that um, you wouldn't otherwise know and that's my plug for why we have a unified system.
Right.
If everybody just has their own and is just doing their own thing, and there's not a collective standards process by which it can flow into all the processes. Everybody doesn't have to, make the same discovery. Everybody doesn't have to trip over the same dead body, as we say, before something in the protocol is improved, corrected, or even fixed. So that's a great thing. And we know, I mean, even the database that we use now to do research on at the
Hmm.
academy, I think the grand total is somewhere now between 65 and 70 million cases that we have,
That are in there. Yeah.
mainly medical, but fire and police have been growing rapidly. Just had the opportunity as a reviewer, just an editor, if you will, to review a study of the before and after implementation of the PPDS police protocol in Cincinnati. I
Hmm.
was involved in the first implementation of medical there.
Hmm.
And so they figured out a way to actually do a comparison, because when you don't have codes before that are
Right.
the same as the codes after, and things to measure, that are equivalent in terms of, well, that time should be the same time as this time. And then you can see if things got, better, worse, longer, shorter. This thing was great. I mean, I guess I was in a good mood. I'd gone over to see my daughter, who is in search and rescue for the state of
Hmm.
Utah, and is involved in the federal teams, who got doubly deployed to the two hurricanes,
Mm.
and was showing me the stuff. And her rescue dog, she got two dogs there, and one of them is to find live people, and the other is a cadaver dog, Swayze.
Oh man.
And so she was so I came back. I finished looking at the article to send it to Matt Miko and the over at ARC. And I was so impressed with the article. I said, or study, not an article, it's a
Yeah.
study, that every man, woman, child, police dog ought to, rescue dog ought to be reading this thing. So it'll be
Hmm.
coming out at some point somewhere, probably in a police journal,
Okay.
or even in the academy's ADR. So look for that.
For sure.
Some very interesting stuff.
Okay.
And that,
So,
that again is the, reason why having the unified system just is so much better. I mean,
right.
tell a medical director once, when he says, well, if I want to change something, I said, you got to, John, you got to determine what's better. I mean, there's two things. There's control and process, but you can't have both.
Okay.
You can go through the process, PFCs, and we get hundreds of them. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of real good ideas in them. And it's nice when you see when you say that's going to be in the protocol the next time. I mean, that's your judgment. It's got to go through the process, but
Right.
um, it's an exciting thing to be involved with. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning to do this. And
I love it. And for anybody that's doubting that any of their ideas of how our stuff can be better go unheard or unseen,
not
you know,
anymore.
not at all. Absolutely. I mean, these are great testaments. I mean, you even remember the names of the people that took the calls that changed the protocol years and years ago. I mean, that's amazing and how impactful to, really change the path of what we do just because like we said, that person that, that Captain Midnight had, the right style and the right way of connecting with callers. And then Jenny in Manchester, pouring out that empathy over the phone. I mean, like you said, if that's not a way to let somebody know that you're here and you're helping them, I don't know what is.
Because exactly right. And because those people did that and it was heard by a process. It's
Yes.
available to everybody in every center. I think I got to look here. I think we've got 4,183, yeah, individual discipline centers that use police, fire, medical. And so that gives the potential for great impact in terms of the call review, people hearing things that could always be better. And like we say, there's a lot of ways to say something, but we think we want to say the thing that's the best for the caller's understanding, and it's then interpretation into a rational answer that then can be used for treatment purposes or coding.
Yeah.
And we hear things all the time. I mean, I think I probably mentioned in the last podcast when we were doing, okay, tell me exactly what happened.
Hmm.
We spent a almost 45 minutes discussing after okay if there
Hmm.
should be a comma or not. Tell me,
Oh,
comma, just to try to get it so the flow and the way that it came across and sounded uh, was the best it could be.
right.
So we're continually looking at that. I know we're doing some work right now on the stuck accelerator
Hmm.
protocol where we heard a case that actually went. When I opened it up, I couldn't believe it. I thought it had to be like an error in the timer. 17 minutes on a stuck accelerator case.
Oh my goodness.
This was on a freeway in Florida. I can't remember exactly. Somebody down there will get the number wrong. I think it was
Yeah.
I-95. And a guy in a 2011 Toyota truck, I think it was a Tundra, doing 100 miles an hour, got up to 110. This guy was as calm as a cucumber, but
Wow.
couldn't get things into, you know, finally the dispatcher who wasted a little bit of time, not too much, it's
Yeah.
getting better, uh, getting Annie Alley information, which is really
Trying. Sure.
useless there. I
Yeah,
mean,
we know that.
and we had some courses and CDs on it
Hmm.
to get right to the action part,
Right.
and he couldn't get it into neutral, couldn't
Pull the
neutral
emergency
even.
brake. Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the emergency brake is not in the protocol. There have been some questions about whether if you did that, whether it would spin the car or whatever,
Flip it. Yeah.
flip
Hmm.
it, whatever. So, but
Pulling the key out.
um,
Right.
pulling the key out's not good. Turning it off, like, okay, you're in your car, you're going to wash your car, and you think, my battery's pretty good. I'm going to listen to the radio. So you put on accessory. So it's one
Right.
click back instead of two.
Right.
That's what,
Right.
that's the way to do it.
Right.
So then it puts everything into kind of manual use. The brakes still work if they're there. They're probably burned
Hmm.
out by then, and the steering will still work. It's stiffer because it's now
Hmm.
manual. Uh, but it doesn't lock the steering wheel, cock kind of sideways, which what happens if you pull a thing and turn it at all. It's gonna do that. The save you from
Right.
rolling down the hill where the wheels are tilted slightly, one way or the other.
Hmm.
And so we're listening to that, and he finally was able to get it into neutral through sort of a downshift method. I remember the dispatcher saying something to the effect of, bumping it down,
Yeah.
but he heard a little, click, and then it worked. I personally think this is the accelerator. The accelerator stuck things in more modern cars is not
Hmm.
the pedal. It's the cruise control. I
Ah,
could be wrong. That's just, don't quote me on that.
sure.
Don't tell General Motors that or whoever it is, Toyota. I think that's what it is. And we
Hmm.
reviewed another case over in England in 2017 that a young man was killed in an accident. He was doing about 100 and 108
Hmm.
and hit the back of they call it, a 18-wheeler, a lorry,
Hmm.
and was killed. But he said he couldn't turn off the cruise control.
Oh,
So that was an interesting. We're currently now
yeah.
going over and we've collected more and more cases. The nice thing about it is people also share the cases, and that's a rare one. Stuck
Right.
accelerators are rare.
Those are rare.
Um,
Well, and
and
then
so,
also, so you said that that one that you just listened to, was that one of our users? That was an EMT
yes,
using our
he had
protocols? Okay.
he had the protocol, and
So
he
they had
engaged
the
it.
instructions to turn
As,
it just one
yeah,
click and turn it off. Yeah. Okay.
and he went through everything. Went through a couple of times, and I mean, how this guy survived on the freeway at 110 is probably a testament to the driver's calmness and
Yeah, for
driving
sure.
skills. And then a
Yeah.
police officer who was notified that was out near the freeway said, told the dispatcher, tell him to try the emergency brake. And the emergency brake didn't stop it. He said there was really nothing there. He said it slowed it a
Yeah.
little bit. I think it went from like 100 and something to 108, or it
Oh,
came down like
wow.
8 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But that apparently did something that regularly hitting on the brake did not do. So the next time he tried the shift down, it worked.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work on that now with we have a thing that's called the cross discipline strike team. Sounds pretty
Hmm.
exciting.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know how
like
exciting
it.
it is. It's police, fire, and medical uh, subject matter experts all getting together to review things so that when we do things, we have everybody's cross discipline input,
Yep.
and we also want the protocol where it crosses between police, fire, and medical, to be the same and take advantage
Right.
of, all the things we can in terms of how it would be. Well, we don't want it different if it doesn't have to be on different protocols. It could
Yeah.
be the same. Sometimes there is a need a little bit, but
Hmm.
everybody looks at that really carefully.
Yeah.
And if it's off a jot, somebody's going to say something about it.
I love
Keeping
this
us honest.
process of changing and how the protocols evolve over time. Do you remember a conversation you and I had in the hallway at the office one time that ended up changing the stroke diagnostic? It used to be put your hands above your head. And I said, Doc, everybody's going like this. And if you're in a vehicle, you're going to hit the roof.
Yes, I
Do you
remember
remember
that.
this? Yes. And I remember
Well, there
you
you
saying,
go. See,
no, we want them to do
even in
out
the
like this.
elevator, if we didn't get
Yeah.
stranded, that would have been
I
another
love it.
protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's things like that where, if you expect just, one person or one medical director or, one comm center, person or group of people, it's not the same as having the collective brain of literally, tens of thousands of people who are sitting in the hot seat doing it,
Right.
all day and all night and then reporting it. So,
Well, and I remember kind of doing my own little sort of independent study, if you will, when I was, because I was teaching ProQA classes. And when I had someone comment, like, well, if they're in a car, they're going to hit the roof. And I said, well, no,
yeah,
because we're putting our arms out in front. And they said, well, not based on this instruction. I said, okay,
exactly right.
everybody in here, when I say this instruction, show me if you're the patient what you would do. And half the people did it right, and half the people went up this way. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's something we've got to fix.
Could have
So,
been better and now is.
yeah, now it is exactly.
Right.
I love it. Let's talk about, are there any cultural or language differences with the call us back immediately for further instructions? Are there any differences with other, since we're available in almost 30 different languages and dialects, are they doing it differently anywhere else?
We'd probably have to ask, Irina
Yeah.
and Veronica et al. In the translation and dialects division, because there probably is something. I haven't heard of anything personally.
Yeah. I was just
I
wondering if that's something that's like worldwide, universally call us back for further instructions, right?
you know, off the top of my head, I haven't heard anything to that effect,
Hmm.
but there certainly could be something because sometimes in translations, there's not an exact translatable word.
Right.
Um, Matter of fact, I've got an example of that. I remember when we were first doing the translation in Carlsberg, Germany, for
Hmm.
The very first German um, translation of the MPDS. And the post dispatch instructions didn't seem to work. And
Hmm.
of course, I'm American. I works good for me in English, but and we had Tootie Benson there, who was the translator. Was
Hmm.
born in Hamburg, but had grown up in the United States most of her life, I think. Uh, Saying no, it really doesn't, and I'm real stickler on, as is the Academy now, on saying cultural differences must be purely cultural, not a different way of doing it because you like doing it that way in Germany versus the way we do it in the United States, for example.
Hmm.
And in that discussion, that the words just didn't translate out, at all one to one. So, but in the discussion, it came out, well, someone in the room, I can't remember, it wasn't the dog, said, well, we have this thing in Germany that's, basically first aid that everybody's taught in school.
Okay.
That's called Sofortmaßnahmen.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if that's the right,
I
exact
love that you could
pronunciation,
even
but that,
remember that too. I love it.
yeah, the good stuff you remember.
Yeah.
Um, and more discussion, it turns out if you say that, everyone will know exactly what you mean.
What you mean. Okay.
Right. In the French translation of post dispatch instructions,
Mhm.
um, our translator called and said they don't like the direct. It's not working. We're trying to come up with it. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, if you translate it into French, it becomes said in English, the instructions that you give after the ambulance is dispatched. That won't even fit on the card, much less the
Yeah.
space on the card,
Yeah.
that goes in. And so I said, Mike, what do you think? And he said, well, I think we could do something different. I said, well, what would you recommend? And he said, I would just do an exact translation of the words, which is, I think, post envoi instructions.
Okay.
And he said, but that's not exactly French. And I said, well, not yet. So
Okay.
it wasn't wrong. It was just a phrase that hadn't been, it's like,
Right. Sure. A new term
yeah.
in the
But you have to
zeitgeist,
be
right?
sure it
Yeah.
doesn't, mean something. I remember learning this. I don't know if this is true or not, but it was in a in a marketing article that I read once. It said when Coca-Cola went to China, somebody did an exact translation of Coca-Cola, which in Chinese turned out to be squash the dead tadpole or something. Oh,
Oh,
right. Or drink the wax tadpole.
drink the
And
waxed
didn't
tadpole.
work.
Yeah,
Didn't
I
work.
bet Coke's marketing team hated that.
Yeah, well, apparently they did it before they found out it wasn't a good idea.
Oh,
There was
that's funny.
another a car product. I can't remember which of the major manufacturers it was, but it was called the Nova, and it was back in the early 70s or 60s.
The Chevy Nova, right?
Chevy Nova, that was it.
Yeah, my dad had one. I
Right.
remember.
And apparently when they were selling it in Mexico, it wasn't selling very well, and somebody finally said, "Well, why not?" At the mothership, and they said, "Because in Mexican it means no go."
Oh, oh, that's hilarious.
Anyway, those are just
Yeah.
some crazy stories.
I love learning about how, these single calls and these single incidents can impact what we do today in thousands of places all over the world. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. I guess my last word is a plea. I want to have more great stories to tell. So tell us more stuff out there.
Yeah.
Put
Keep
some more
sending
good
in your
stuff.
calls.
The good
Yeah.
stuff, because you can end up being famous for it. So
I love
put
it.
put your name in the book.
Put your name in the book.
Jenny Greenwood's in the book, right?
I love it. I think that's
Okay,
a great mic drop. So yeah, reach out to us when you've got those great calls and send them our way because Doc wants to hear them. And we could see changes to the protocols with your name behind it. That's
that's right.
awesome. Well, thanks again, Doc. I can't wait to have you back again and always a pleasure learning from you and getting to know a little bit more about the history behind our stuff.
Well, I'm not dead yet, so reach out again.
Of course. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to let us know what you liked and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Look for @TellMeExactly to get the latest on all things emergency communications. Tell Me Exactly is a Priority Dispatch Corporation podcast developed by our team of protocol experts and hosted by me, Meredith Jensen, with Cody Ekman as producer, Reading Roberts as sound engineer, Scott Robinson and Jason Barber as executive producers.